Good evening, this is Paul Lennon speaking to you from Guatemala. And this is take 21 of my memoir, Knave and Sentimental Dubliner in the Legion of Christ, My Life in the Legion of Christ. And we're at chapter 10 here, called Rebelling, and it's part C, the last part of chapter 10, called Gunfight at the Cotija Corral. So you may remember, those of you who are old like me will remember Good Fight at the OK Corral. This was a gunfight at the Cotija Corral, Cotija, Michoacan, Father Maciel's native town in the state of Michoacan, and where the Legion had several houses and had a retreat center. And that's where I'll be referring to today. Finally, the thunderclap exploded, abrupt and fierce. Although I had not been conscious of the storm brewing. In November 1984, the Quintana Roo missionary community traveled to Cotija, Mexico to begin spiritual exercises. I was a changed person. Unbeknownst to myself, I was no longer afraid and would not be easily silenced. I did not realize there was an edge to me when I arrived at the retreat center on a pleasant November evening. It was customary to begin the week-long spiritual exercises on a Sunday evening. And the main event of the spiritual exercises would be the keynote address given by Father Maciel at the beginning. And as usual, Father Maciel was late. And so, opening talk was scheduled for the morning after the group's arrival. A score of legionaries had come from the missions, different parts of the mission, about 20 of us, brothers, seminarians, and priests. These spiritual exercises were tailored to our needs. Finally, mid-morning, Monday, and amid certain amount of fanfare, Maciel made his triumphal entry. The captive audience sat down to listen, admire, applaud, and assimilate. He began by painting a rosy picture of newly recruited members, basically, breaking down the doors of the Legion and of the Regnum Christi to enter. How generous these young men and women were compared to the retreatants, us, lukewarm and tired older priests and religious. The atmosphere around me of acceptance and tolerance, if not docility, plus the fawning of the members further frustrated me, and my restlessness increased. As I heard Father Maciel weave this wonderful tale of wonder and felt the passivity in the room. They were all yes men, and he was going on and on a way that devalued the efforts we were making on the missions. How easy it was to compare and criticize. How easy it was to underrate humble parish work in the hot and humid tropics when compared to the flashy Regnum Christi apostolates among the rich and wealthy. When was the last time he had experienced the physical discomfort of bugs and sticky heat? Mosquitoes. Many times had I witnessed his avoidance of a draught of air or a wayward sunbeam. Mr. Padre had to have his hat on. Many times had I witnessed his avoidance, also his fussing over a glass of water that was not the proper temperature, or his rejection of the wrong kind of mineral water. That's not exactly the San Pellegrino, or the fizzy one, or the straight one, or the still water. I don't know. And I personally remember him, dismissing a mango. He loved mangoes. He wanted those big petacones mangoes from Mexico. I don't know whether they flew them into Rome from Mexico. And this is not a joke. Forgive me. But it had to be just right. Not too green, not too, and not too ripe. Father Maciel extolled the virtues of the latest legionary poster boy at that time because we go, every week, every year this is somebody new. This year it was Florencio Sanchez Soler. Actually, I think if he was a Mexican, but he was working in Madrid, and Maciel liked his style. Florencio's kind of a swashbuckling kind of a guy, no nonsense, tough, macho, and he was extolling him to the heavens, and for me, forgetting those who had gone before, laying the framework for his work, the groundwork for his work. I mean, the man who founded Madrid for the Legion of Christ, for the Regnum Christi, excuse me, was Father Alfredo Torres. Not a flashy guy, hard working. What about the legionaries who encountered obstacles on their path and began to struggle with obedience and with their human frailties? I was incensed by the despotic sending of the two men to Gabon. This was still hurting. This was still biting, together with the fate of other admirable legionaries who I felt had been unjustly sidelined. And of course, my superior, Carlos Sancajo, the quiet man sent to Caracas, Venezuela, Alfonso Samaniego, uh, absolutely kicked out of the Anáhuac University because he didn't agree with the way somebody was promoting, excuse me, the Regnum Christi lay movement, the latest novelty in Father Maciel's quiver. So I was pretty annoyed. All of a sudden, and people would say to me, "Paul, don't say anything, don't say anything." But there was nobody there to save Paul at this moment, and Paul goes up, spoke up, interrupting Father Maciel. Oh my God. He kept talking about all those coming in, and then I said, well, what about those leaving? What about the other end of the sack? You're telling me all these people coming in, but the sack, there's a hole in the bottom of your sack, and all these people are leaving for different reasons. All those legionaries who were troubled, leaving, or had already exited. Many who stayed were hurting, banished, or put out to pasture. An ugly argument arose. Maciel told me to shut up. Cállese. ¿Quién se cree? Who do you think you are? No sabes de qué estás hablando. You don't know what you're talking about. None of your business. Leave it to the superiors. They're the ones in charge. What are you talking about? You're nobody, you know? I fired back that it was my business because those who were being mistreated were my brothers. The names I just mentioned, just blurted out, Samaniego, Neftali Sanchez, etc., etc., etc. They came tumbling out of I kept giving these examples of people who were good legionaries, but they had some kind of a difficulty and suddenly they were banished or put out to pasture or sent into silence uh, out of this out of the mainstream legionary life. The fight response had kicked in and Hannibal was crossing the Rubicon. I would not back down or sit down. By this time I was standing and hopefully, I don't know, shouting, but certainly loud voice, firing with both pistols at Maciel, who was sitting erect at the table. Perhaps it was the exploding frustration of 23 years listening to the infallible, authoritarian, and condescending saint spouting out of him without ever being able to answer or reply. Few, if any, including me, had ever seen him confronted in such a way. As I mentioned, Father Alfonso Samaniego did it once, and look where he ended up, totally kicked out of the rector of the Anáhuac University, provincial of the Legionaries of Christ. Boom, you're out of here. Get lost. How long did the altercation go on? So intensely was I involved that I had no idea of the time. 5, 10, 15 minutes. The community of about 20 priests and brothers looked on in stunned silence. Had they dived for cover under the saloon tables while the gunfighting was going on and they were ducking the bullets? Finally, one spoke up, another of my Irish born uh, boyhood friends, St. Vincent's Class 11, 1961. We joined the Legion together. He a little later than I did, but Father Thomas Moylan. Nuestro Padre, nosotros no hemos venido para oír discutir. We're not here to hear a discussion, Father Maciel, Nuestro Padre. We're here to hear you speak. We want to listen to you. To which the once naive and sentimental Catholic boy replied, if that's the way you all feel, then this is not the place for me. And I walked out of that room, never to return to that house or to the Legion. Next little paragraph, Jack and the Beanstalk. What's that all about? Jack and the Beanstalk. The above happened in the heat of passion. I had not planned my attack on Father Maciel. I was carried away by emotion, by an outpouring of suppressed complaints and accusations. It was not the controlled confrontation that I would have liked, even though there was a lot of reason to my points. It happened to me as much as it happened to it was something that just came over me, shall we say. Ever since that day, I've struggled to understand and make sense of it. It was as if little Jack had wanted to chop down the beanstalk and kill the giant. This is an insight and intuition. I cannot help thinking this made when I was writing the book, I thought of Bruno Bettelheim, who has a book written about interpretation of fairy tales. Here he is with Jack and the Beanstalk. As the ogre pursues Jack down the beanstalk, Jack calls out to his mother to get the axe and cut the beanstalk. The mother brings the axe as told, but on seeing the giant's huge legs coming down the beanstalk, she freezes into immobility. She is unable to deal with phallic objects. We're talking about here Freudian psychiatric interpretation. Jack grabs the axe and cuts off the beanstalk, and with it brings down the ogre who perishes from his fall. In doing so, Jack rids himself of the father who is experienced on the oral level as a jealous ogre who wants to devour. But in cutting down the beanstalk, Jack not only frees himself from a view of his father as a destructive and devouring ogre, he also thus relinquishes his belief in the magic power of the phallus as the means for gaining him all good things in life. In putting the axe to the beanstalk, Jack forswears magic solutions. He becomes his own man. He will no longer take from others, but neither will he live in mortal fear of ogres, nor rely on mothers hiding him in the oven. So I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Boy, did that have an echo in my little head there. No one followed me to try to prevent me from leaving or to dissuade me from carrying out such a hasty decision. Perhaps I could not have been stopped. Maybe it was too late. Walking to my room, I packed my belongings into the battered suitcase I had brought with me and went out into the street, totally alone, and left to my own devices for the first time in 23 years. Now, almost 41, I stood at the bus stop in Cotija. I did not know the bus schedule, nor did I care. I would wait, though I was half afraid someone might come after me. What would I do then? Although I had never heard or read of Siddhartha at that time, I was resolute like him. I can think, I can wait, I can fast. This is the way Siddhartha, the Buddha, resists. It may be useful to some people who are in a tight spot. I can think, I can wait, I can fast. Any bus was good enough to take me out of there to Guadalajara, anywhere, far away from the sour taste in my mouth, the tightening in my gut, and the painful pounding in my temples. I had been so angry. So I was throbbing with anger, pounding with anger. Really, perhaps even in an angry rage. Forgive me, people, forgive me. The second class bus, with its cross section of Mexican provincials and chickens in cages, would do me fine. I was beginning a very long and lonely journey. Luckily, I did have some cash because on the missions I was a assistant, so I had cash for my gas, for my petrol, and for other little things for the parish. And I had my return ticket from Mexico City, which I hadn't thought I was going to use so quickly. Staying that night at a dingy hotel in Guadalajara, close to the bus station, the first time in my entire life I had ever spent the night totally on my own, I believe. Uh, the first time in my life in a hotel on my own, too, I'd say. I made sure to bolt the door against the many prostitutes, the tipas, that Father Maciel referred to. Uh, they were surely going to burst in and take away my virginity. So I had to protect myself against them. My romance with the Legion of Christ was over, and I wanted to be alone.